The night it began, the house was quiet. Not peaceful, not calm. Just quiet in a way that feels wrong once you remember it. The kind of silence that sits heavy in the air. The kind that makes even familiar walls feel like strangers. Outside, the streetlights glowed softly over trimmed lawns and parked cars. A neighborhood where nothing ever happens, where neighbors wave from driveways, where doors are left unlocked because fear feels unnecessary. Inside that house lived a man everyone trusted. He was the kind of husband people admired without trying to. The kind you pointed to when explaining what normal looked like. He woke up early, drank his coffee the same way every morning, kissed his wife on the cheek before work, paid the bills on time, remembered birthdays, helped neighbors shovel snow without being asked. His voice was gentle, predictable, reassuring. The kind of man you stop suspecting the moment you meet him. That was the danger, because trust doesn't arrive loudly. It settles in slowly. It builds through routine, through repetition, through the absence of chaos. And once it's there, once it feels solid, it becomes invisible. And sometimes trust is the safest place to hide. No one noticed the discipline behind the smile, the way his answers were always measured, never rushed, never careless. No one questioned the pauses, just half a second longer than necessary before he spoke. No one thought twice about the way his eyes seemed to study people, not cold, not threatening, just attentive. He didn't just listen, he calculated. He wasn't merely living a life, he was maintaining a performance. Every gesture had intention, every habit reinforced the image. He understood something most people never stop to consider. People don't look for monsters where they feel comfortable. They look away. They relax. They fill in the blanks with what they want to believe. And so the performance continued. Years passed without incident. No police visits. No arguments loud enough to spill outside the house. No financial struggles anyone could see. No whispers, no rumors, nothing that would trigger suspicion. When federal agents would later dig through his past, they found emptiness, clean records, stable employment, addresses that made sense, references that spoke warmly of him. No fingerprints of guilt. No paper trail, no reason to look twice. His wife believed she knew him, truly knew him. She could describe his routines without thinking, his moods, his preferences. She trusted the way he touched her shoulder when passing by, the way he sighed at the end of a long day, the way he smiled when he thought no one was watching. Friends believed they knew him too. They trusted him with secrets, with money, with their children. They described him as reliable, solid, boring in the best way. Even the system believed he was clean, and that belief gave him room. Behind closed doors, where performances could drop for just a moment, something was wrong. Not loud wrong, not dramatic wrong, quiet wrong, subtle wrong. Money moved when it shouldn't have, accounts shifted, transfers disappeared into places no one else saw, names appeared that weren't his, then vanished. Phones came and went, old ones discarded without explanation. New ones introduced casually like nothing had changed. Every lie was practiced, not invented on the spot. Rehearsed like lines in a play, delivered with the same tone every time, calm, reasonable, believable. If you asked the wrong question, he already had the right answer. His wife felt it before she could name it. A sensation she brushed off at first, a faint unease, like forgetting something important but not knowing what. She told herself it was stress, fatigue, life moving too fast, because admitting doubt would mean questioning everything. And questioning everything feels dangerous when your entire world is built on certainty. At night, when the house went quiet again, she sometimes watched him sleep, listened to his breathing. Even then, he seemed controlled, as if rest itself was something he managed carefully. She didn't know she was sleeping beside a stranger.
See you tonight, sweetheart.
This is not the story of a violent man
Okay,
lurking
drive
in
safe.
shadows.
Love you.
Not a sudden explosion of rage or blood. It's something colder, more unsettling. This is the story of a man who understood people better than they understood themselves. He knew how much others relied on consistency, how deeply they trusted routine, how reluctant they were to imagine betrayal wearing a familiar face. He knew how institutions worked too, how systems are designed to catch chaos, not calm, how red flags are louder than quiet perfection. And so he gave them nothing to hear. A husband who didn't just fool his family, he fooled his friends, he fooled his neighbors. He fooled the FBI. And while investigators chased louder criminals, messier criminals, he continued living his life, attending dinners, smiling in photos, standing beside his wife as if nothing in the world could touch them. The most terrifying part wasn't what he did. It was how close he came to never being seen. Because if not for a series of small, almost meaningless cracks, this story would never have been told. It would have ended quietly, with memories no one questioned and lies buried beneath years of normalcy. But cracks have a way of spreading, and beneath the calm surface of that perfect home, something was already shifting, something unstable, something that couldn't hold forever. The silence that night wasn't empty, it was waiting, and soon it would break. The first crack was so small it could have been nothing. The kind of thing people overlook every day. A document that should have been there but wasn't. An explanation that arrived a little too late. A look that lingered just a second longer than comfort allows. Nothing you could accuse someone over, nothing you could prove. But cracks never announce themselves. They whisper. His wife felt it before she understood it. Not as fear, not as panic, but as a quiet disturbance beneath the surface of her life. A sense that something familiar had shifted slightly out of place. Like walking into a room you know well and sensing the furniture has been moved in the dark. She replayed moments in her head. Conversations that once felt harmless now sounded different. Words that seemed normal now carried strange weight. She wondered if she was imagining things. Most people do, because doubting the person you trust most feels like doubting yourself. When she finally asked questions, they came out carefully. Casually, she didn't accuse, she didn't push, she simply asked. And he answered calmly, too calmly. His voice never rose, his face never tightened. He didn't hesitate. He didn't contradict himself. In fact, he anticipated her doubts before she could fully express them. He filled the silence quickly, smoothly, like he had rehearsed for this moment long before it arrived. She told herself that meant honesty, but lies have weight, and carrying them for too long bends even the strongest mask. Small things began to stack. A phone call that ended abruptly. A sudden errand with no clear purpose. A late night explained away with work. Each incident harmless on its own. Together they formed something harder to ignore. She tried to push the feeling down. She reminded herself of who he was, of how long she had known him, of how stable their life had always been. People don't just become someone else overnight, but sometimes they've been someone else all along. While the cracks widened quietly at home, something else was unfolding far away from her awareness. Behind office doors. Behind screens glowing late into the night. Federal investigators were already circling a different case. A web of false identities. Financial manipulation that crossed state lines. Records that didn't match. Names that appeared in one place then surfaced again somewhere else under slightly different details. A pattern was forming, slowly.
Trust me,
They weren't
I
looking
have
for
everything
it,
under
not yet.
control.
As agents traced
If
the
we
edges
approach
of the
this
case,
logically,
addresses
there won't be
began to
any
overlap.
issues.
Phone numbers echoed familiar digits. A name surfaced briefly, casually, almost dismissed as coincidence. His name, it didn't stand out, not at first. Background checks revealed nothing alarming, no criminal history, no outstanding warrants, employment records that made sense, tax filings that appeared clean. Neighbors described him as normal, reliable, quiet, friendly. When investigators spoke to his wife, she defended him without hesitation. She laughed at the idea, told them they had the wrong person, that her husband was incapable of deception, that he was the safest man she knew. And in that moment she meant it. Still, the agents watched, quietly. No confrontations, no accusations, just observation, transactions logged, movements noted, conversations analyzed. They paid attention to pauses most people ignore, to patterns that didn't break even under pressure. What they didn't realize was that he was watching too. He noticed the unfamiliar cars, The subtle questions asked out of context. The emails that arrived phrased just slightly wrong. He felt the shift in the air before anyone said his name out loud. And he adjusted. Accounts
I
were
saw movement
closed.
in the upper
Others
window,
were
east
open.
side.
Communication routes
Copy that.
changed.
Copy that.
Habits were refined.
Wait
He
for
became
entry
even
signal.
more careful, even more controlled. Each conversation became measured, each reaction precise. Nothing impulsive, nothing emotional. He understood the system because he had studied it. He knew how investigators thought, how they waited, how they tested. He gave them just enough to stay interested, and never enough to act. At home, the tension thickened. His wife noticed the distance growing between them. Not arguments, not anger, distance. The absence of something that used to be there. She asked herself when they stopped talking about the future, when his answers became shorter, when his eyes stopped meeting hers as often. She wondered if there was someone else. That thought hurt more than suspicion ever could. Affairs at least fit into stories people understand. Betrayal that follows familiar rules. The truth was far worse, because while she searched for emotional explanations, the real danger was structural, calculated, cold. The cracks widened, not enough to expose him, not yet, but enough to prove something essential. The man no one suspected wasn't just hiding, he was actively shaping the reality around him. He wasn't reacting to pressure, he was managing it. And the closer everyone came to the truth, the more convincing his performance became. That's the paradox of deception. The deeper it goes, the more real it feels, even to the people living inside it. By the end of this chapter, no one knew who to trust. Not fully, not anymore. The house still stood. The marriage still existed. The man still smiled and said goodnight. But beneath it all, the ground had shifted. And once that happens, collapse isn't a matter of if, only when. It didn't happen with a confession. It didn't happen with handcuffs or flashing lights. It happened with a pause. A pause so small most people would never notice it. A breath held half a second too long. A moment where certainty cracked. For months, the FBI had been watching from a distance. Not chasing, not accusing, studying, letting the story tell itself. Financial flows that curved instead of moving straight. Behavioral patterns that repeated too perfectly. Inconsistencies buried deep in spreadsheets and timelines where only patience could find them. There was still no proof, but there was pressure. And pressure changes people. The confrontation wasn't dramatic. No
It happened
raid, no
quickly.
raised voices,
I saw
just a
him leave the
meeting,
room,
neutral tone.
but I didn't
A
see where he
conversation
went
designed to
after
feel
that.
ordinary, safe, forgettable. That was the trap. The agent asked a simple question, one that sounded routine, one that should have been easy to answer. It referenced a detail from years earlier, something small, something buried beneath layers of normal life. He didn't expect it. For the first time, his response didn't arrive immediately. His eyes shifted just slightly. His mouth opened, then closed. The silence stretched. 1 second, then another. It was almost nothing, but it was enough. That pause changed everything. Investigators didn't react in the room. They didn't confront him. They didn't let him see what they had noticed. They let the moment pass. Let him recover. Let him finish the answer he had now recalculated. But once he left, everything accelerated. Timelines were rebuilt from the ground up. Older records were pulled, the ones that had once seemed irrelevant. The places no one had looked because there was no reason to. Names that had been dismissed were examined again, this time without assumptions. And suddenly the story collapsed inward. Aliases that once looked unrelated began to align. Financial transactions, spread carefully across years, snapped into a recognizable pattern. Addresses connected. Phone numbers echoed one another. Dates overlapped in ways they never should have. This wasn't a man hiding a secret. This was a man living two lives. The husband wasn't just lying to protect himself from a mistake. He had constructed an entire parallel existence. A shadow version of himself that moved quietly alongside the life everyone else knew. Different names, different purposes, different rules, and he had balanced them flawlessly. Until now, when agents laid it all out, the picture was undeniable, not chaotic, not impulsive, precise, methodical, intentional. This wasn't desperation, it was design. And then came the moment his wife would remember for the rest of her life. They didn't bring her into an interrogation room. They didn't overwhelm her with accusations. They sat her down gently, carefully, and they began with facts, dates, documents, proof that didn't raise its voice. At first she resisted. She laughed softly, shook her head, said there had to be a mistake, that they were confusing him with someone else. She explained his routines, his kindness, his reliability. But then they showed her the evidence, and something inside her broke. Not all at once, slowly, like glass cracking from the inside. Every memory rewrote itself in real time. The late nights, the unexplained trips, the moments she had questioned and then dismissed. Each one returned, sharper now, heavier. Every smile became suspect. Every loving gesture felt staged. The man she loved never existed, only the role he played. The betrayal cut deeper than fear. Fear can be processed. Fear has rules. Betrayal dismantles the past. It poisons memory. It turns comfort into something unrecognizable. She didn't scream. She didn't cry at first. She just went quiet. That silence said more than words ever could. As the investigation moved forward, the illusion shattered completely. Not with violence, not with spectacle, but with cold, undeniable clarity. The kind that leaves no room for denial. The kind that doesn't care how much it hurts. For years he had outsmarted everyone, his family, his friends, professionals trained to detect deception. He had understood one critical truth: most people trust patterns more than instincts. He had given them patterns, but perfection leaves no room for error. And the more perfect the illusion, the more fragile it becomes. That single pause, that one miscalculation, the moment he assumed everyone was still blind, that was all it took. When he realized the truth was closing in, something shifted in him. Not panic, not rage, something colder, resignation. As if he had always known this moment would come, even while believing he could delay it forever. There was no dramatic breakdown, no emotional confession. Just a man finally facing the fact that his performance had reached its final act. And yet, even then, questions remained unanswered. How much had his wife truly known? How many moments had been real? Where did the lies end and the truth begin? Those questions hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Because exposure doesn't bring closure, it brings clarity. And clarity is often the most painful truth of all. As this chapter closed, one thing was certain: the mask had slipped. But the full cost of what lay beneath it had yet to be paid. And the reckoning was still ahead. There was no chase in the end. No sirens. No last-minute escape. Just a man sitting alone, finally seen. The room was smaller than his lies. Gray walls, hard chairs, a space designed for truth, not performance. For the first time in years, there was no one left to convince. No routine to maintain, no mask to adjust. The man who had built his life on control had run out of room to maneuver. When the courtroom filled, it didn't buzz with drama. It fell silent. The kind of silence that carries weight. One by one, the details were laid out. Names that were never his. Accounts that fed lives no one else knew existed. Timelines that overlapped in ways that made denial impossible. Each fact stripped away another layer of the story he had spent years perfecting. And when it was over, what remained wasn't a monster. It was something more unsettling. He wasn't a criminal mastermind driven by chaos. He wasn't a violent figure hiding dark impulses. He was a man who believed intelligence could replace morality, that cleverness could excuse deception, that understanding people gave him the right to manipulate them. That belief had carried him far, but it could not carry him out. His wife never spoke publicly. She didn't give interviews. She didn't write statements. Some betrayals don't need words. They live quietly in the way someone avoids certain streets, in the way photographs are packed away instead of displayed, in the way trust, once broken, never fully returns. For her, the trial wasn't an ending. It was a rewriting. Every memory re-examined through a new lens. Every moment of love questioned. She wasn't mourning the man who stood exposed in court. She was mourning the man she thought she married. Neighbors struggled too. Not because they had been harmed directly, but because acceptance demanded something uncomfortable. It meant admitting they had been wrong, that their instincts had failed. That safety had been an illusion built on familiarity, because evil doesn't always look like evil. Sometimes it looks like borrowed sugar and polite waves, like holding doors open, like showing up on time, like doing everything right on the surface. Sometimes it looks like love, like routine, like safety. The FBI didn't just close a case that day. They took something with them, a reminder that danger doesn't always announce itself. That deception doesn't need chaos to thrive. Sometimes it needs calm, structure, consistency. They learned what this man had understood all along. Systems are designed to detect disruption, not perfection. And so did everyone else connected to the case. Trust without awareness is vulnerability. Charm is not character. And the most dangerous lies are the ones we want to believe. Because believing feels easier than questioning. Trust feels kinder than doubt. And certainty feels safer than curiosity. This story was never just about crime. It was about perception, about how easily certainty turns into blindness, about how the desire for normalcy can silence instinct. The man no one suspected didn't hide in alleys or shadows. He didn't disappear into the margins of society. He hid in plain sight, in homes that looked like everyone else's, in marriages that appeared stable, in routines that felt familiar enough to stop asking questions. And even now, long after the verdict, that truth lingers, not as fear, as awareness. Because somewhere else in another quiet neighborhood, another door is unlocking. Another life is unfolding calmly, normally, comfortably. And the most frightening question is whether monsters exist. It's how often they look just like us.